Okay, we have our next presentation. Meeken is going to present about lousy compression, gender divisions and omissions in new media art narratives. Each of these topics are different, but all deal with the absence of art by women and trans and other kinds of things. So we look forward to your presentation, Luke.
So yeah, the name of this talk about lossy compression, it's a computer science term for when.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. I'm not correcting you. It's just my intro or whatever.
I thought it was lousy.
I mean, it is kind of the same thing. But what lossy compression is when information is removed from a file to make it smaller and more efficient to store or to transfer, like when you compress an MP3 or you compress an image. And this contrasts with lossless compression, where lossy compression always results in a degradation of the image. So these are three images that are heavily artifacted, which means they have visible remnants of this compression process. And these are JPEG images of three new media artists, Mika Satomi, Mimi Onoha, and Leah Schoenfelder. Leah is an independent game designer. Mimi Onoha is and their names are cut off by this bar for some reason, activist and coding artist. And Mika Satomi does work with both art and design work with wearable interactive electronic artworks. And none of these three artists have pages on Wikipedia. I'm reflecting on the purpose of today's editathon. I think that the history and also the present story of new media art has been subjected to its own form of lossy compression, and one which has conspicuously omitted the contributions and voices of women. Also, all the background images of these slides are from another new media artist, if you know that her, from her series Radiances, and she also does not have a Wikipedia page. So I teach new media arts camps every summer through the Smithsonian. And before starting doctoral work here, I taught new media arts classes in a public high school in Central Virginia for 4 years. In developing the curricula and materials for these classes and camps, like this game design curriculum that's screenshotted over here, I aim to do what any responsible art teacher does when planning their lessons and have gender parity at the very least in the artists that we looked at and discussed. In order to do this, I had to do a fair bit of independent research. Typically, I had to go well beyond the mostly male artists that I was taught about in art school, especially in terms of digital art, new media art, and well beyond the new media artists that are listed on Wikipedia, about 2/3 of which at the least are men. And the ratio was much, much worse 4 years ago when I was putting together my secondary curricular stuff. So the omission of women new media artists from Wikipedia in particular wreaked havoc for my student-centered teaching practice as well. Because I encourage students to independently investigate the field of digital art to find work that resonated with them. And for example, my high schoolers had this project, actually I was just telling Karen about it, I think at lunch, where I asked them to independently research the work of a chosen new media artist and develop an online resource using HTML coding and stuff, basically make a website with information and examples of artwork about an artist. And these three artists, Mika Satomi, Beatrice Lartigue, and Yuri Suzuki, are not on Wikipedia, by the way. These women are POC artists. So a recent study by the online ad firm Chitika found that 92% of people don't go past the first page of Google results when they're searching for a topic. And actually, even further, right, almost a third just go to the first link that comes up. And when you do a Google search for new media art, the very first thing that comes up is the Wikipedia page, a list of new media artists. So based on these statistics, right, this means that if I left my students completely to their own devices, just turn them loose on the internet to find artists they're interested in and research, the main portal, Wikipedia, and Google, through which they would begin learning about new media art and choosing the subjects for their research, would be this androcentric list that's on Wikipedia, because that is where they would be funneled to by the algorithm. At the time, I just addressed the issue by curating a list of artists for students to choose from, which included more women, queer, and POC artists. But a more permanent solution, and one that events like this can put into effect, would be to actually remedy Wikipedia's omission of women new media artists. So to I talked sort of about my classroom relevance, I want to look at maybe some numbers that will show like a broader kind of relevance to these things. A kind of anecdotal measure first to kind of transfer into other numbers, right? These are the numbers of the camps I've taught since 2014 at the Smithsonian. And they're about 60% of the students there have been young women or girls. And I have had trans men and women, but all of my students thus far have been binary. I acknowledge them in my count, but there weren't any in my numbers, which is why the graph looks the way it does. Contrasting that, I was recently over spring break at the Whitney, and there was a huge exhibit spanning like big swaths of new media art history by Christiane Paul, like one of the most significant new media art curators in the country, called Programmed Rules, Codes, and Choreographies in Art. And again, spanning almost the entire history of the medium at one of the most significant museums in the country. And in this exhibit, even it was curated by Christiane Paul, who is a woman, for what that's worth, right? The ratio was almost reversed. It's a little hard to see here, but from 60% girls in my classes to about almost 70% male artists in this exhibit, right? And to look at less kind of isolated and anecdotal data, right? We can look at the gender breakdown of the degrees awarded to people in the arts, which means like the people that are entering into this level, this discipline at a professional level, right? And apologies, these are government statistics and they are explicitly binary. So everyone is forced into either the man or woman category on these graphs. And in what are considered traditional studio arts like sculpture, painting, drawing, printmaking, fiber, textile, and weaving arts, 70% of degrees awarded are to women, right? In degrees that are considered digital media arts, which include just broadly digital arts, games and interactive media, digital communications and media, video and photo, and whatever is, oh, okay, no, that's good. That name isn't covered up. It's 60% men, much less women. And in some of these individual ones, if you pull them out, the ratios are really dire, like games and interactive media is 80% men are awarded these things, right? So like that elicited this broader question beyond just the Whitney exhibit I went to, right? Why in my teaching at my schools and at my camps, right, are the majority of the kids who are taking these things and young adults who are taking these things who are really excited about this stuff and are producing really exciting work, most of them are girls and women. But then when you get to the like post-secondary level and the professional level, right, the ratio reverses and the majority of practitioners are men. And in some of those sub-practices, the vast majority of practitioners are men. I could do a comparison of like video game camps I've taught versus this, and the comparison would be even more drastic and wild. So like what's happening here? And I think there's tons of factors. One factor that seems relevant to this conversation and which has some data to back it is here. This is a study that was done by Microsoft, and it was focusing on women in STEM, but I feel like a lot of the gendered pressures are very similar between new media arts and more specifically STEM fields. And this was a study of girls from a number of different countries. This study is very Eurocentric. These are all European countries, unfortunately, of girls who identified having a role model who was engaged meaningfully with technology and who did not have a role model. And it was gauging their interest in engaging themselves with technology in like a meaningful and productive or professional way. And the girls who had the role model had a significantly higher level of interest. And what was interesting to me about this study in general is the definition of role model that was used was explicitly not someone directly in their life. So this wasn't like I have a parent who's a digital artist or an engineer, or I had a direct teacher. Their definition of role model was explicitly people that the student doesn't already know, that they're aware of in culture. It could even include fictional figures in culture, which relates really specifically to what we're doing with Wikipedia, right? Because this means like children here who, if they searched on Wikipedia for new media artists, found women role models on it, would be more likely to engage at the professional level in these media, in these fields, right? So, right, and where will the girls see these role models? When the common repositories of cultural knowledge, like Wikipedia, leave them out. And when the most visible and powerful awards granting bodies in digital arts overwhelmingly recognize and celebrate men. This is a hashtag Kiss My R's thing that went around after the pre-Ars Electronica, one of the most celebrated kind of like awards of digital media art in the world, was kind of outed as 90% of the awards over the history of the existence of the award have gone to men. And digital artist and programmer and activist Adi Wagenacht made this kind of like droll observation that the award itself is of a woman with her head and limbs severed, and how like that is kind of telling of what the awarding bodies our attitudes are towards the people that are participating in this field, right? Because even if the field is majority men, it is not 90% men. And so this is not an appropriate ratio by any measure, right? So in terms of what we can take away from this today at the Wiki Edit, I've compiled a Google Sheet at this address of women new media artists. It's got 244 artists on it, and every name, and this is drawn from my own curricula and a lot of help from a list by media artist Golan Levin. And this is publicly accessible at that address. Each artist has 2 toggles next to them. One is whether they're on Wikipedia at all, and the other is whether they're listed on the Wikipedia page for new media artists. There are some artists that have a page on Wikipedia, but they don't show up on that page. That is the first thing that comes up if you search for new media art. So for a lot of people, they are still invisible. And parts of the page are editable. If you go to this link, you can make changes to Wikipedia and then log them on here, and that will change the ratios and things. You could also add artists to the bottom if there's people that I missed out on. At present, of these 244 artists listed, only about a third are on Wikipedia, and only about a 10th are listed on the new media artists page. So the ratio is pretty dire. So there's 3 different ways you can engage with this information. If you're like, it's been a long day and you're checked out and you want to do something that you can like simultaneously eat pasta salad and do at the same time, you can take the artists who already have Wikipedia entries, but who aren't on the new media arts list, and just add links to them on the list, right? And I have a link to that list at the top of this page here. So you could just say, hey, Adrian Siegel, I'm going to add you on the artist page so that when people search for new media artists, they'll find you. So they don't have to search for your name to find a woman who does this stuff, right? So there's lots of opportunities for that like easy, low friction interaction. Medium level, I have some artists who are, I've identified as their articles are stubs or their entries are like flagged for revision. Those are things that you can just do minor edits to. And if you are really engaged by any of these statistics or this field in general, right, if you feel like rolling up your sleeves, you can create new entries for any of the artists who don't have a Wikipedia page yet. I haven't done it for everyone, but a lot of the artists do have descriptions kind of pointing in the direction of what their practice is. So if you see someone that seems really exciting, even if you don't already know about them, and you are spurred to action, you can make a whole page for somebody and add them to the list. And that is it. Where we're at.
Fantastic. Wow.